Over the past semester and 2 semesters, really, we spent a lot of time learning how to solve different kinds of equations. That's a typo here that should say equations. And despite all the time we spent learning how to solve different kinds of equations, there are sometimes scenarios where we encounter an equation that we don't really know how to solve yet. So we're going to look at how we can first graph a function on the graphing calculator and then use the graphing calculator to help us solve equations. So you've probably graphed functions on the TI-83 or 84 before, so this is just probably more of just a reminder, maybe a bit of review. What you want to do is, first of all, they'll give you a function. On the calculator, there's the y equals button, which is right below the screen. It's on the top left. And that will bring you to a menu where you can just plug in, write in an expression for the function. And then you hit the graph button. Now, usually it will, the default is to graph it on the window from -10 to 10 on both axes. But that doesn't always suffice. That's not always an appropriate window. So after I look at this graph of a function on the standard window, I might do some tinkering with the window to make sure I get a good view of what this function is actually doing. So let's say we want to graph this function, right? Y equals x squared plus 16x plus 72. So I'm going to go to the calculator, x squared. So this button here next to the green alpha button with a bunch of letters on it, that's just their variable button. So x squared plus 16x plus 72. Now if I just look at this on the standard window, and this is not set to standard yet, but let's see, looking at it on the standard window, there's -10 to 10 on both axes. It shows up, but kind of over, in the top left corner. So clearly the function exists sort of more up here, and I'm not really getting a full view of what it's doing. So I want to make, I want to view this on a better window. I don't think I need the x values to go too far over to the right. So I'm going to make my x values go from, say, -15 to 5. And there are other windows that might be appropriate, but I'm just, I got to start somewhere. So I'm starting there, and if I do that, now this is sort of a little bit more centered, but I know it needs to go up a lot further, and it probably doesn't need to exist down here. So I'm going to let y start at 0 and go up to, like, I don't know, 50 maybe. So I hit the window button, and I'm just going to plug this in. So 0 to 50. And that's better, right? Now if I look at this function, the equation x squared plus 16x plus 72, I'll note that if x is 0, y is equal to 72. The y-intercept is equal to 72. And if I want my graph on the calculator to capture that, I'm going to just set my y window to include that value. So maybe I'll go from 0 to 80. And there we go. So that's not a bad viewing window for this function. Sometimes I have to make just several adjustments before I'm kind of looking at a nice view of what this function does. Now, to solve an equation graphically, again, we have all kinds of algebraic techniques, but sometimes we might run into a function for which we don't know the solution, or we don't have a technique that works. So if I'm going to solve an equation, what I do is first get all terms on one side of the equation. So I have an equation of the form something equals 0. And whatever that something is, that's what I'm going to graph. I'm going to put that into my graphing calculator. So on the next page we have an example. Say I want to solve this equation, 3x squared minus x to the 4th is equal to 2 plus x. So I'm going to subtract 2 and subtract x. And then I have 3x squared minus x to the 4th minus x minus 2 equals 0. This here is what I'm going to put in my y1, my y equals editors, and I'll just put it in for y1. So I'll clear that. And what was it? 3x squared minus x to the fourth minus x minus 2 squared minus x to the fourth minus x minus 2. Now usually I start out just by looking at it on the standard window. If you hit the zoom button, on mine's option 6 is Z standard. That'll bring it to the minus 10 to 10 on both axes, so I'm just going to use that option. Okay, so here is the graph of the function. Now I want to know where this function is equal to 0, right? So in the graph, that just means I want to know where it crosses the x-axis. Now I think I want to adjust the window a little bit. I know that I'm interested in particular in this part of the graph. So here's another feature that your calculator can do. You know, we could set the window manually, but also if you hit the zoom button, the first option is Z box. That means create a little box that you want to zoom in on. So I'm going to hit enter. Now you see we have a blinking cursor. So I'm just going to move the cursor down to one corner of the box, hit enter. And I just want to draw my box so that it includes both those zeros. Now I'm going to use the arrow key to move up, 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 and then over. So you can see it's drawing this box. And so now if I hit enter, it'll graph just that part. Okay, so that's a much nicer view of this. Now I want to find both of these. So I'm going to go through this process twice. We've got to go through this process once for each of these values that we're looking for. Above the trace button it says calc. On my calculator it says that in blue letters here. So I'm going to hit second calc for calculate. And I want to calculate a 0, meaning where is the function equal to 0. So option 2. Now as soon as you do that, look on the bottom, it's asking for a left bound, and now your cursor traces the function. So I'm going to move my cursor using the arrow keys so that it's somewhere, as long as it's somewhere to the left of a 0, and I'm going to find the 0 on the left first. So somewhere to the left of that 0, hit enter. It wants a right bound, move it so that it's somewhere to the right of that 0, hit enter. So now notice it drew these lines. Notice that the 0 I'm looking for is in between them. Now it wants a guess. I always just hit enter. And there it is. When x is negative 1.70211, y is equal to 0. And now there's another one. So I have to go through this process again to find this other 0 over here. So second calc, option 2, 0. I need to give it a left bound. So when I draw the bounds, what's really important is that only one of the zeros is captured between the left and right bounds. If there's more than one 0, the calculator will have a hard time and maybe get confused. So there I am to the left of that 0. I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to use my arrow key so I'm somewhere to the right of that 0 and hit enter. And then when it asks for a guess, I'm just going to hit enter. And there we have negative 0.718312. Oops. And this is not y equals, this is of course x equals 0.718312. And those are our two zeros.